The foghorn shrieked as steel storm doors slammed shut, trapping my parents in the lighthouse they had exiled me to. My name is Hillary. I'm 25, and I just chose a dead man's secrets over my family's lies. Clutching the coded journals they came for, I ran out into the storm, the ocean roaring on my side. They left me on this cliff with nothing but a backpack 14 years ago. Tonight I was escaping with a fortune they couldn't comprehend and a single, cryptic instruction from the man who raised me. Grace forward. Before I tell you what happened in that storm, drop a comment with where you're from and be sure to like and subscribe. If you've ever had to make an impossible choice to save yourself, you'll understand exactly what I did next. I was 11 when they left me. The car smelled of leather and my mother's too sweet perfume, the kind that clung to your clothes like a lie. I sat in the back, clutching a worn backpack, my knees pressed together to keep from shaking. The Maine coast stretched outside the window, gray and jagged, the ocean snarling under a bruised sky. My mother, Karen, turned in her seat, her smile tight like it was painted on. "Just for the summer, honey," she said, her voice high and thin like a wire stretched too tight. My father, Mark, didn't look at me. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the winding road. I wanted to ask why, but the words stuck in my throat, heavy as stones. The lighthouse loomed ahead, a weathered sentinel perched on a cliff, its beam cutting through the fog like a blade. They stopped the car at the base of the path, gravel crunching under the tires. My mother handed me my bag, her fingers brushing mine, cold and fleeting. "Be good, Hillary," she said, already turning away. My father muttered something about being late, and then they were gone. The car's taillights swallowed by the mist. I stood there, the wind clawing at my jacket, my heart pounding like a trapped bird. They didn't look back. A shadow moved at the top of the path. Great-uncle Silas Blackwood. I'd never met him before, but I knew him from the way he stood, tall, broad, like a cliff himself, carved by years of salt and storm. His face was all angles, eyes deep-set and unreadable, gray hair pulled back under a wool cap. He didn't smile, didn't offer a hug. "This way," he said, his voice low like the rumble of distant thunder. I followed him up the path, my sneakers slipping on the wet stones, the lighthouse growing larger with every step. My room was small, barely bigger than a closet, with a cot, a wooden chair, and a single window facing the ocean. The waves crashed below, relentless, like they were trying to tear the cliff apart. Silas handed me a tarnished brass compass, its surface scratched but heavy in my hand. "Everything you need to know about a place," he said, "is where you stand and which way you're facing." I nodded, though I didn't understand, my fingers tracing the compass's edges. He left me there, the door clicking shut, and I sat on the cot, staring at the ocean, feeling like I'd been dropped off the edge of the world. The years blurred together after that. Silas didn't talk much, but he taught me things. Not with words, but with his hands. How to oil the lighthouse gears, how to read the stars when the fog was too thick, how to feel the shift in the wind before a storm. We worked side by side, our silences comfortable, like the steady sweep of the lighthouse beam. I learned to love the rhythm of it, the creak of the machinery, the salt on my lips, the way the light cut through the dark. Silas was no father, no friend, but he was something else, something solid. I stopped waiting for my parents to come back. I stopped crying. The lighthouse became my home, its beam my heartbeat. I was 25 when Silas died. It was sudden, a heart attack that took him in the night, his body slumped in the chair by the control panel. I found him at dawn, his eyes half open, staring at the sea. The lighthouse beam had gone dark, the first time in decades, and the silence was deafening. I stood there, my hands shaking, the compass in my pocket suddenly heavier than ever. I didn't cry, not then. I didn't know how anymore. A week later I was called to the mainland. Arthur Vance's office was all glass and sharp edges, the kind of place that made you feel small. He was slick, his suit pressed, his smile too perfect. He read Silas's will, his voice smooth as oil. I sat there numb as he explained that I was the sole heir to the Blackwood estate, the lighthouse, the land, and controlling shares in Blackwood Marine Solutions, a maritime tech company I barely knew existed, $92 million. The number hit me like a punch. But what stopped my breath was the clause about the compass. Its activation was tied to a biometric lock keyed to my pulse. I gripped the arms of the chair, my mind spinning. Silas had planned this. I left the office in a daze, the compass burning a hole in my pocket. A sleek black car pulled up, and my heart stopped. My parents stepped out. Mark and Karen, older now, their clothes expensive, their faces polished. But their eyes were sharp, hungry, like wolves circling a kill. "Hillary, darling," my mother said, rushing toward me, her arms outstretched. Her embrace was suffocating, her perfume the same cloying scent from that day 14 years ago. "We were devastated about Silas," she said, her voice thick with tears that didn't reach her eyes. My father stood behind her, his smile stiff, his hands in his pockets. "We never stopped thinking of you," he said. I didn't move, didn't speak. Their words felt like knives, each one slicing deeper. They followed me back to the lighthouse, insisting they wanted to help. I didn't want them there, but I didn't know how to say no. They moved in, their voices filling the silence I'd grown to love. My mother rearranged the kitchen, tossing out Silas's old mugs. "This place is so bleak," she said, wrinkling her nose. My father paced the living room, talking about streamlining the estate, his eyes darting to me like I was a puzzle he needed to solve. I felt like a stranger in my own home, my skin crawling every time they called me honey. I clutched the compass at night, its weight grounding me, reminding me of Silas's words, "Where you stand, which way you're facing." One night, I overheard my father on the phone, his voice low, urgent. "The offshore network is still secure, but we need access to the primary ledger before they find out." My stomach twisted. I stepped into the room, and he froze, his face pale. "Who's they?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. He laughed, too loud, and said it was just a business call. But his eyes betrayed him. They were scared. They didn't leave. My parents settled into the lighthouse like it was theirs, their presence a slow poison. My mother cooked elaborate meals I didn't eat, her chatter filling the air with empty words about reconnecting. My father pored over papers, muttering about taxes and investments, always watching me. "You wouldn't understand the finances, honey," he said, his tone gentle but sharp. "It's complex. Let us handle it." I felt smaller every day, my confidence eroding like the cliffs outside. Was I really too young, too inexperienced? I started to doubt myself, my hands trembling when I tried to fix the lighthouse gears, my sanctuary slipping away. Arthur Vance called often, his voice smooth, reassuring. "Just sign the power of attorney, Hillary," he said. "It's temporary to manage the estate transition, standard procedure." I wanted to believe him. I wanted someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. But every time I looked at the compass, I felt Silas's presence, his silence urging me to stand firm. I didn't sign. My mother started leaving old photos around. Pictures of me as a kid, smiling with them at a fair, at the beach. "We were so happy," she'd say, her eyes misty. But I remembered the truth, the arguments, the cold silences, the way they'd look through me like I wasn't there. The photos felt like a trap, a way to rewrite the past. I hid them in a drawer, but they haunted me, making me question my own memories. One evening, I escaped to Silas's workshop, the only place they hadn't touched. The smell of grease and metal calmed me, the tools familiar in my hands. I sat on the floor, the compass in my lap, my chest tight with grief and anger. I didn't want to be this person. Scared, alone, doubting everything. I slammed the compass down on the workbench, my frustration boiling over. Click. The sound was soft but sharp, like a key turning in a lock. The compass's faceplate sprang open. My breath caught. Inside was a key, intricate and strange, unlike any I'd ever seen. My pulse had unlocked it, Silas's biometric lock. I stared at the key, my mind racing. The will, the compass, my parents' sudden return, my father's cryptic phone call, it all connected. This wasn't about money, it was about something bigger, something Silas had hidden. I clutched the key, my heart pounding, a spark of defiance igniting inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I didn't know what the key opened, but I knew one thing. Silas had trusted me, and I wasn't going to let him down. The key felt alive in my hand, its edges sharp against my palm, like it was daring me to use it. I sat in Silas's workshop, the lighthouse beam sweeping through the dark, its rhythm steady but no longer enough to calm me. My parents' voices drifted from the main house. My mother's fake laugh, my father's low murmur. They were planning something, and I was running out of time. The compass lay open on the workbench, its secret spilled. Silas had hidden this key from me, trusted me with it. I wasn't going to let him down. I remembered something he'd said years ago when I was 16 and sulky, hating the endless chores. We'd been in this same workshop, his hands black with grease as he fixed a gear. "There's a sea chest under the bench," he'd grunted, not looking at me. "Navigational history. Don't touch it unless you have to." I'd rolled my eyes then, thinking it was just another of his cryptic lessons. Now, my heart raced as I dropped to my knees, shoving aside old tools and oil cans. There it was, a heavy, bolted chest, its wood worn but solid, a strange lock gleaming in the dim light. My hands shook as I slid the key in. It fit perfectly, the mechanism clicking like a heartbeat. The lid groaned as I lifted it, revealing not maps or charts, but a stack of leather-bound journals, their pages yellowed, filled with Silas's tight, slanted script. I recognized it immediately, but the words didn't make sense. Rows of letters and numbers, a code we'd played with when I was a teenager. He'd called it a game, a way to sharpen my mind. I'd laughed, thinking it was pointless. Now I saw it for what it was: preparation. I carried the journals to my room, locking the door behind me. The lighthouse beams swept over me as I sat cross-legged on the cot, deciphering the first page by candlelight. My fingers traced the patterns, my mind slipping into the rhythm of the code. Hours passed, the ocean roaring outside, but I barely noticed. The words began to take shape, and with them, a truth that made my stomach lurch. Blackwood Marine Solutions wasn't just a tech company. It was a front. A carefully built machine that laundered assets and created new lives for people who needed to disappear. Witnesses, defectors, people running from monsters. Silas had been their guardian, their lighthouse. And my parents? They weren't strangers to this world. They'd been clients once, people Silas had helped escape, but they'd betrayed him, sold out the network for a payout, forcing him to hide them to protect the others. That's why they'd left me here, not out of neglect, but because Silas wanted to keep me clean, to shield me from their poison. The realization hit like a wave, cold and heavy. They weren't back for me. They were back for the journals, for the secrets that could destroy the network and make them rich. I closed the journal, my hands trembling. The compass sat beside me, its engraving catching the light, grace forward. Silas's words, his instruction. I wasn't just his heir, I was his successor. The journals became my obsession. I hid them under a loose floorboard in the workshop, checking the lock obsessively. My parents' presence grew heavier, their smiles sharper, their questions more pointed. "Have you found anything unusual in Silas's things?" my mother asked one morning, stirring her coffee with a delicate clink. I shrugged, my face blank but my heart pounded. They knew I was hiding something. I could see it in the way my father's eyes followed me, the way he lingered near the workshop door. I started sleeping with the compass under my pillow, its weight a reminder of Silas's trust. At night, I worked on the journals, deciphering page after page. The network was vast, spanning countries with names and aliases I didn't recognize but felt heavy with importance. There were bank accounts, encrypted ledgers, safe houses, and then, a name that stopped me cold: Arthur Vance. The lawyer wasn't just helping my parents, he was part of their plan. A note in Silas's hand confirmed it: Vance, compromised, tied to syndicate, do not trust. I needed to know more. I called Vance, my voice shaky, pretending to panic about the estate. "I found something," I said, letting my words stumble, "a discrepancy in the company's client list." There was a pause, too long, and then his voice, smooth as ever. "Are these the encrypted ledgers from the European accounts?" My blood ran cold. He knew about the journals. He was in deeper than I'd thought. I hung up, my mind racing. The lighthouse felt like a cage now, its walls closing in. My parents were watching, Vance was waiting, and I was alone with a secret that could get me killed. I needed a plan, but first I needed to know what I was up against. I dug deeper into the journals, finding a list of contacts. People Silas had trusted, people he'd protected. One name stood out, marked with a star: Elena Korsakov. No details, just a phone number and a single word: priority. Whoever she was important. I stared at the number, my finger hovering over the sat phone Silas kept in his emergency kit. I didn't know who Elena was or if I could trust her, but Silas had. That was enough. I couldn't keep running in circles. The journals, the key, the truth, they were all pieces of a puzzle Silas had left me to solve. I had to act. That night, I walked into the kitchen, my heart pounding, but my steps steady. My parents were there, my mother sipping wine, my father scrolling through his phone. I set a single decoded journal on the table, its leather cover worn but heavy with meaning. Offshore network, I said, my voice calm, though my hands shook. The primary ledger. Is that what you're looking for? The air shifted, like the moment before a storm breaks. My mother's glass froze halfway to her lips. My father's phone clattered to the table. For a moment they were silent, their masks slipping. Then my mother laughed, sharp and brittle. "Hillary, what are you talking about?" she said, but her eyes were wild. My father stood, his face darkening. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, stepping closer. I held my ground, the compass in my pocket grounding me. "You left me here to keep me out of this," I said, my voice rising. "But you came back for this, didn't you? To sell it all out." My father lunged, his hand reaching for the journal, but I was faster. Years of working the lighthouse had made me quick, sure-footed. I yanked the journal back and bolted for the control room, my heart in my throat. They followed, their shouts echoing through the house. I reached the control panel, my fingers flying over the switches Silas had shown me years ago. A manual override, he'd called it, for emergencies. I flipped it, and the lighthouse roared to life. An ear-splitting foghorn blast that shook the walls, lights flickering and dying, steel storm doors slamming shut with a clang. My parents were trapped in the living area, their pounding fists muffled by the heavy metal. I grabbed the journals and the sat phone, my breath ragged. The storm outside was building, rain lashing the windows, the ocean roaring like it was on my side. I slipped out the back door, the wind tearing at my jacket, and ran into the night. The lighthouse beams swept over me, a fleeting guide, but I knew these cliffs better than anyone. Silas had taught me that. I was on my own now, but I wasn't helpless. The storm was a living thing, clawing at me as I stumbled along the cliffs, the journals clutched to my chest, the sat phone heavy in my pocket. Rain stung my face and the wind howled, but I kept moving, my boots slipping on wet rock. Silas had taught me these paths. Every curve, every loose stone. I could navigate them blind, and tonight I might as well have been. The lighthouse beam swept behind me, a fading pulse, but I didn't look back. My parents were trapped, but they wouldn't stay that way. Vance would come for me, others would too. I was a target now, carrying secrets worth millions, secrets that could destroy lives. I found shelter in a cove, a jagged cut in the cliff where Silas and I used to watch the seals. The rocks shielded me from the wind, but the cold sank into my bones. I crouched there, shivering, the journals damp but safe. My fingers brushed the compass in my pocket, its engraving sharp against my skin. Grace forward. The words felt like a command, a lifeline. I thought of Silas, his quiet strength, the way he'd look at the sea like it held all the answers. He'd known this day would come. He'd spent 14 years preparing me for it. I pulled out the sat phone, its screen glowing faintly. My hands shook as I dialed the number marked with a star, Elena Korsakov. I didn't know who she was, but Silas had trusted her. The line crackled, then a woman's voice answered, low and accented, sharp with suspicion. "Who is this?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "Hillary Whitmore," I said, Silas Blackwood's niece. Silence stretched, heavy as the storm. Then, "What do you have?" I told her about the journals, the network, my parents' betrayal. I didn't ask for help, I just laid it out, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. She didn't speak for a long moment, then said, "Stay hidden, I'll find you." I waited through the night, the storm raging, my mind a tangle of fear and resolve. I could run, disappear with a fraction of Silas's fortune, start over somewhere far away, or I could turn the journals over to the FBI, let them unravel the network, but that would expose everyone Silas had protected, people who'd trusted him with their lives. Neither felt right. Then I remembered Silas's lessons, not just about the lighthouse but about me. He'd taught me to fix things, to navigate, to stand firm. Grace forward. It wasn't just about saving myself. It was about saving them, the people in the journals, the ones Silas had given everything to protect. Dawn broke, gray and heavy. The storm easing into a drizzle. I heard footsteps on the rocks above, deliberate and slow. My heart pounded, but I gripped the compass, ready to run or fight. A depth search mode activated. A figure appeared at the mouth of the cove. A woman, tall and lean, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes sharp. "Hillary," she said, her voice cutting through the wind. It was Elena. I knew it without asking. She moved like someone who owned the ground she walked on, her presence filling the cove. "You're Silas's girl," she said, not a question. I nodded, my throat tight. She didn't waste words. "Give me the journals, you're done here." I hesitated, then handed them over. She was the network. She was Silas's legacy. And I trusted her, because he had. Elena disappeared as quickly as she'd come, leaving me alone in the cove. I didn't know what she'd do with the journals, but I felt lighter, like I'd passed a weight I wasn't meant to carry alone. I stayed hidden, the compass in my hand, its needle steady despite the shaking in my fingers. I thought about my parents trapped in the lighthouse in Vance, waiting somewhere in the shadows. They'd come for me, or someone would. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Silas had given me everything I needed, his knowledge, his strength, his trust. I wasn't the scared 11-year-old they'd left behind. I was something else now, something they'd never understand. Days later, a message came through the sat phone, short and encrypted. "Assets secured. Threat neutralized. Your guardianship is appreciated." I stared at the words, my heart pounding. I didn't know what it meant. Not exactly, but I knew enough. My parents, Vance, they were gone, swallowed by the world they'd tried to exploit. I didn't ask questions. Some answers were better left in the dark. A year later, I stood on the lighthouse catwalk, the ocean stretching out before me, endless and wild. The legal battles over the estate had vanished, paperwork dissolving like mist. I was in control now, the fortune mine to wield. But I didn't want it for myself. I'd turned it into something new. The Whitmore Circle, a foundation named after the girl Silas had saved, not the one my parents had abandoned. It was a home for kids like me, lost, forgotten, but not broken. A place for shelter, education, STEM programs to teach them how to build, fix, create. The first girl arrived that morning, a quiet 13-year-old with eyes that didn't trust the world. She reminded me of myself, all those years ago, standing on the cliff with a backpack and a broken heart. I took her to the workshop, the smell of grease and metal welcoming us like an old friend. She looked around, hesitant, her hands stuffed in her pockets. "Can I learn to fix things?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled. A real smile, one I'd earned through years of silence and strength. I handed her a clean wrench, its weight solid in her small hand. "Absolutely," I said. She smiled back, tentative but real, and I felt something shift inside me, hope, bright and sharp, cutting through the fog. The lighthouse beam swept across the sea behind us, steady and sure, a silent promise of guidance. I didn't need to look at the compass to know where I stood, or which way I was facing. Grace forward, I was moving toward something better, and I wasn't alone anymore. The most important lesson Silas ever gave me wasn't in a book, it was in the weight of his compass. It taught me to trust my own position, even when the world and the people who should have loved me tried to tell me I was lost. They tried to use my past to control my future, but your intuition is a force they can never truly silence. Tell me about a time you trusted your gut over what someone else told you. Let's fill the comments with stories of inner strength. Remember to like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming the odds.